Welcome to the Wing Space podcast, a place to take up space, a space for you to settle in, sit back, relax, and focus a little bit on health, wellness, faith, family, and this crazy thing called life.
This podcast is not a replacement for mental health treatment or professional health care. In case of crisis or emergency, please contact your local healthcare provider or dial 911.
Hey there, and welcome to the Wing Space podcast, a place to take up space. We are closing out our third season where we have taken 6 opportunities to talk with local experts about all things health and wellness and faith and family and just all the things that are so important in this crazy thing called life. I am excited to have Kelley, Sidorowicz, and Emily Thompson with me today, who are from our neighborhood yoga studio, Evolve Yoga and Wellness. Ladies, I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And maybe you guys can just tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
My name is Kelley, and I am co-owner with Emily of Evolve Yoga and Wellness. Evolve has been around for, I believe, around 13 years, but we have been the new owners as of almost 3 years. And we provide yoga training, teacher training, as well as a variety of yoga classes from foundations and beginners to hot vinyasa to restore, so a variety of classes, something for everybody. And we also host international and local retreats as well. So we kind of really expand all wellness, so not just yoga on the mat, but filling up your soul, filling up your bucket with travel and all wellness, self-care things as well.
I think Kelley said it the best. I mean, we covered everything.
And maybe you can tell our audience a little bit about what makes you guys experts in this field. We're gonna talk about yoga today, but for those people that might be listening and are gonna say, "Oh, I don't really do yoga. Maybe this episode's not for me." I want to say, keep listening, because we're going to talk a lot more about just yoga. We're going to talk about movement and breath and mindfulness and just wellness in general. But what makes you guys experts in this field? Maybe just tell a little bit about some of your own training and expertise.
Well, I think between Kelley and I mean, we have almost 20 years experience combined, but beyond just, things that we do exercise wise, I mean, we're both human beings who have children and full-time jobs and, have to live life, and all of that gets intermingled in there. And so we try to bring that every day into our practice and into the studio, so it is practical and it can be used everywhere we go. And that's the wellness aspect of our place. That's when we go travel to do our retreats and we fill up our cup and we make ourselves feel better. Like, it's just, so we try to bring real life into the not so clear, direct exercise. Like, what do I do? How do I live? How do I make myself, go into a gym, and how do I make myself go onto the mat into a room full of people? And we just try to make everybody comfortable. So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I think of yoga, the practice of yoga is more than just the physical practice that you see, right? There's so much more to yoga. There's several limbs that will help you guide you through life and obstacles. And a lot of times the things that we learn on our mat, whether it's challenging postures or just finding comfort and stillness, which can be very challenging, we can apply those things to our everyday life. When we hit some challenges, when we feel a little anxious, we can use those tools we learned on the mat to apply them to our everyday life, whether it's the breath techniques to calm like a stressful day, or it's finding comfort in the discomfort. Right? Every day is not going to be the most comfort leisurely day. So just we use those tools to, get us through this thing, like you said, called life.
Yeah, I love that you guys are incorporating so much of the components of wellness into the work that you do and for your community, and, reaching out beyond the walls of Evolve and beyond geographically our area that we are here. Maybe one of these days I'm going to be able to jump into one of your retreats, because I've been eyeing them for sure. So why don't we talk a little bit for the person that is maybe interested in doing some form of exercise and some movement, maybe incorporating some yoga. Let's start for that person that's listening, and then we'll kind of move our way into the person that's not quite yet there, but still wants to incorporate just some aspects of wellness. So can we start with the person that maybe they're already doing some exercise, maybe not quite mindfulness and yoga, maybe they're more, kind of the runners and really hardcore exercisers. I know that I have teenage boys who laugh at me when I tell them that they need to do yoga, and one of these days they're going to embrace it. I know they will. But what do you guys have to share with our listeners who are thinking, yeah, I want to add a little bit more of this into my practice and into my healthy habits?
I think first and foremost for any exercise routine is finding something that you enjoy doing. If you hate running, maybe don't choose running to get started. I think that's the most important, is finding the thing that you enjoy, because not only does it help you physically, but emotionally. If you're enjoying what you're doing, not only will that get those great endorphins going, but also you're more likely to do it again. And the consistency over time is the best thing. So it's really, I don't know that there's like one exercise that's the best or you should do it this way. We're all very different individuals, and I think finding the thing that best suits you and you enjoy and that you're willing to get up a little early to do, or the number one, that's I think the first thing. As far as yoga is concerned, I think we hear this all the time. I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible. But that is one of the main purposes of doing yoga, is so that we can be more flexible, yes, physically, so that when we are doing those sports or running or anything, we recover quickly, but also reduce the span of injury, or reduce the likelihood of injury is also so important. Another aspect of yoga and how it can help with runners or those folks that are doing like those high intensity sports or athletics, breath awareness, right? When you are on a long run or you are running across the field, your heart rate's going to obviously increase, and you need to be able to find more capacity, more space in your body and in your lungs for that breath. So that is a huge part of all athletics, is finding that capacity to breathe as well.
And then the other aspect of that flexibility term is to have flexibility of the mind. So when you're going for those things, like you practice on the mat and the things are feeling really hard, and in your mind you're like, I can't do this, like this hurts, or this stinks, I don't want to be here, I could be anywhere else, my skin is crawling, I feel like I'm on fire. And then you have to stop, and yoga makes you go, am I actually in, like, am I in trouble? Am I in pain? Is this bad? And it's like, if all those answers are actually no, you get to say, oh, I'm just looking for a cop out. Like, I need to be here. I need to push. I need to challenge myself. And then off the mat, when you're in the grocery store or you're trying to go for a run and you're like, I don't want to be here, I don't want to do this, you go, that's the same thing. I was just doing this on the mat. Can I be here? Can I sit with this discomfort? Am I just uncomfortable, or do I actually need to be out of this situation? And it just starts to challenge like your nervous system and your thought process, and eventually you're like, oh, I'm cool, I'm fine, I can do this, this is no big deal. And that's just what yoga does, that, and it just starts seeping into your bones and you don't even realize it.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of what you're talking about is being comfortable with the uncomfortable in order to grow. And I a lot of times use the idea of, a caterpillar to a butterfly. I can't imagine that being in that chrysalis is super comfortable, but imagine becoming a butterfly, right? Just how beautiful that process is. Do you have any particular tips for our listeners in terms of how they can take some of those yogi techniques that they might use on the mat into the grocery store, or a difficult meeting, or a difficult interaction with someone, to be able to generalize the use of those skills a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think a big part of our yoga practice is being mindful. So a lot of times we might create lots of stories in our head about that difficult conversation, or about deadlines, or about the crowds in the store. But it's really about coming back to like what's happening right now in this moment. And through yoga practices, we learn how to ground ourselves. We learn how to use our breath to calm our heart rate. And you learn that you're really in control of so much of your body just through your breath, right? When we get anxious, our heartbeat goes really fast, our heart rate rises, but with a breath, we can have the capacity and the control of our heart rate to reduce it. And then it allows us to think a little bit clearer so that we can prepare for that difficult conversation. But also helps us, I think something I'm always working at is creating boundaries. Right? We might one day on the mat be able to go a certain way or the other way, and it's just being able to come back to yourself and create healthy boundaries, whether that is through anything that requires in work or in family situations. Same as in the grocery store, maybe just making that conscious effort of, we talked about like parking a little bit further away and getting those few extra steps on a beautiful day, just being aware of what you're doing in the moment, which I know is very challenging. And I think there's a huge misconception that in the practice of yoga is to clear the mind, and really it's not. It's just to become more aware of what's happening up here, and noticing when you fall into those traps of worry or anxiety, and being able to be like, and stop yourself to be able to come back to the present moment.
Absolutely. And it's like those little things start to build on each other. So if you are going into a difficult conversation or a really stressful environment like the grocery store sometimes, and you park further away, you can choose to say, like, you're preparing yourself in that mental preparation of like, I will step out of my car, I'll check in with my breath. How's my heart? How's my breathing? Where is it being like, where's it getting stuck at? Sometimes when we get anxious, our breath stays here and we're just sipping air, and we don't even realize it. And so when we take that moment and say, I'm going to send my breath all the way down to my belly, and then you take that nice deep inhale and then that exhale, and you feel a little bit softer in the shoulders. And then as you start stepping towards wherever you're going, each step feels that connection with the floor, feel with the ground, and you can get a little bit more sense of where you are in the moment. It's kind of like, the name 5 things you see, name 5 things that you smell, name, all that whole thing applies every single time. And you don't even realize that you're doing it when you're in yoga, because it asks us to sit with all of that. So again, like Kelley said, you don't want to erase everything that goes on in the mind, because that's what the mind is supposed to do. It's supposed to think, it's supposed to challenge you, it's supposed to keep you safe and aware, but you get to learn how to work with it by being able to acknowledge all the noise that comes into the mind, as well as working alongside of it, and it just letting it be, and it doesn't become a distraction. It doesn't take over your entire day and you get to sit with it and like let it consume you. You just allow it to hang out, and you can breathe through it, and you're focused and you've got clarity, and it works. So
Yeah, and I think just to add on, this is a lifelong practice. Like Emma and I talk about this, and these are things that we're practicing and working on every single day as ourselves, as yoga teachers, as moms, as business owners. This is not something that like maybe you master it over time. It's just a practice of, maybe we do, but maybe like it's a practice over time. It's not like a perfection or you checked that box. It's just a kind of a thing that we're always working on. So I can relate to how it could be very overwhelming to hear these things and hear like, I don't even know where to start. Like that could never be me. And really it's just a day by day, hour by hour situation. It's just like, just in this moment, I'm going to choose this. And I'm not going to worry about the next minute or the minute before where I maybe wasted some time. I'm just going to focus on this moment. And that's really what it's about, is being aware of right now.
Well, I think there's a reason why it's called practicing yoga, or the practice of mindfulness, right? Because we're practicing, which means some days it's going to look beautiful and textbook, and other days it's going to look a little sloppy and bumpy, but it's still going to work. And you guys were talking about this idea of mindfulness, and it made me think that, I've had people say before, oh, well, I can't meditate, or I can't be mindful because there's just too many thoughts in my head and I can't clear them. Well, as you said, we're not trying to clear it. We're trying to actually be aware of what is in our brain. We've got 70, 80, 90,000 thoughts a day. And to just be aware of a few of those little snippets that go through our brain can be really helpful to pay attention to What am I feeling physically, emotionally? What's in my surroundings? Am I hot? Am I cold? Am I uncomfortable? What is it? And you can just start with stopping and taking a breath and just taking a little survey of what's happening. I think it was Emily, you mentioned an idea of when someone's like on the mat, being aware of pain. And I've had people ask before, well, I want to exercise, but what if my back hurts or my this hurts or that hurts? Could you talk a little bit about the difference between pain that's bad when you're on the mat or doing some kind of movement or exercise and more like pain that's just discomfort as you settle into a pose or a certain posture?
Absolutely. This is actually a huge topic in the yoga community. It's the when you're on the mat in a pose, like the difference between, well, there's also the fear of already thinking you're going to be in pain. So that's another one. When you, if you start there and you're getting on your mat and you're anticipating the pain already, you've kind of already set yourself up. Your nervous system's already like ready to go. It's all locked down. And it's not to say that you shouldn't go into an environment knowing, like, with that thought in your head. You should just be cognizant of, this is a possibility. What can I do to support myself? How do I modify? How do I find the variations that work for me and my body? And that would be the step where you would might seek out a physical therapist. You might go to the doctor and say, hey, these things are triggering these symptoms within me. I'm not really sure what it is. It might be something I'm doing. And then they help you there. But if it's that, I'm not sure if this is going to hurt me or not, or I think this hurts, and in reality it actually doesn't, it's that moment on the mat. I'm going to use pigeon pose as an example. It's a deep hip opener. You're really getting in there, and it's very intense. And that's the word is it just intense, or is this causing me pain? And if it's pain, you back out, you find a different route, right? But if it's just intense, you get to ask yourself the next questions. Is it intense in a way that it's physical? Or is it an intense in a way that is mental or even emotional? And then that unlocks one thing after another after another. Like, is my brain trying to get me out of this because I don't want to sit here and feel this? Or is it my emotions that I don't want to sit here and feel because it's just so overwhelming? And that's, again, that extra step of yoga, getting into all your nooks and crannies that you aren't aware of. And it starts to unlock those things that might be holding you back because of the unknown. And that's the just the process of unraveling all those layers of, how did I get here, and how can I release and let go and move on and see where change takes me.
Yeah, and I think if there is some fear going into a class, I think, like Emily said, like if you have chronic issues, always seek a doctor or a physical therapist. Also, talk to your teacher before you start class. Like, hey, I have some low back issues, or I have a knee pain, and your teacher can offer lots of modifications. So we have lots of props to support everyone's practice, no matter how they show up. So we'll be able to provide, or your teacher should be able to provide options to support you. And a lot of times when we're doing things, I'll say like, oh, there's no like fireworks that go off once you can touch your toes. It's really about not forcing and finding a way to soften and let go of that so that you can get a little bit deeper. And that's kind of where the magic happens.
You guys said something that I feel like is a metaphor for life, and that is the pigeon pose. We've all, maybe all, have been there, but you back out and you find a different route. Gosh, if that's not a metaphor for life, right? Sometimes we don't just quit. We don't come out of the pose altogether. We don't pull ourselves out of the situation completely. We come back, we find some awareness, we make a little shift and an adjustment, and we go back in. And that can be for so many things in life, but also it's important when we're talking about exercise and movement and yoga. Sometimes the way that I do things is not the way that Kelley's going to do things, which is not the way that Emily's going to do things. And that's okay. That's the beauty of the individual nature of movement and the way that our bodies work. After having 5 knee surgeries, Pigeon pose on the left does not look the same as pigeon pose on the right, and I'm okay with that. But some people have to be able to find that okayness with not being able to do what someone else is doing. And I think there's probably a lot of, well, I know there is because I've taken Kelley's classes. There's a lot of talk within classes about not comparing, not looking left and right, but really focusing on what's on your mat. And again, for life, right? Focus on what's in front of you to have your own awareness and your own presence, like within your own life.
Yeah, and I think for a chronic avoider like myself, we've learned that the only way is through, right? So avoiding certain postures or avoiding certain movements, it's eventually going to find you, right? And so finding the space where it best works for you, whether it's through props or another outlet, and getting through it, right, to find a place that you can have that passive application.
And then as well as like when you're in the beginner seat, everything is, it's just the unknown. And so when you go into a yoga class, uh, us as teachers, we love to bring up like where, like, if you're a beginner, mark this day, take this in, channel, like think about all of the things. Maybe when you go home, write it out in a journal. What was your experience like? And then for those people who have been practicing for 3, 5, 10, 20 years, we ask them to go back to that time. Like, how did you feel then? How do you feel now? Can you look like back and say, wow, that was a crazy ride. Look at me. I'm amazing. And it's those little acknowledgments that help, again, that unlocking and that self-discovery that make things off the mat better, and they make you more present and live life a little bit more authentically and fully.
Well, sometimes I think we just think, oh, well, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. Instead of looking back at that little pin, that moment in time when I actually couldn't do it, but now I'm doing it. It just doesn't look the way that that person's doing it because I have made strides. I have had growth, and just kind of putting a little pin in that like calendar in my brain of where my growth has come and that I am actually doing it. It just might not look like the expectation that, is picture perfect, and being aware of that growth.
Yeah, I think there's also a misconception that everyone else knows what they're doing, and none of us do. We're all, depends on the day, the minute, we're all, have our own things that we bring to the mat or bring to life. It just might look different in how we manifest it and how it looks, how it shows up. So also know that everyone's got stuff they're bringing. Nobody knows what they're doing. So that's another thing that I think is a huge setback for especially those starting a yoga practice or any exercise. Like, right, I'm going to look silly. They know what they're doing. I'm in a group of people. No, I promise you that's not the case. Some just hide it better than others.
True that. And on top of that, we say this a lot in our yoga classes of like the don't compare. Like it's not about what it looks like, it's about what it feels. And you have to really lean into that because your brain really wants to know what your neighbor's doing on the mat. Why am I not folding this deep? Why aren't my leg's not as high as theirs in, three-legged dog or something like that. But you have to practice every single time. Just tune in, just be here. Your mat becomes your four corners of safety, and it's just you and whatever you like to unfold, and your neighbors just kind of fade away. And that takes time, and that takes just keep showing up. That's really, so yeah, that's really the key. It's the show up part.
I love that so much about yoga and kind of the values within it are just general ideas that we can put forth in life, right? They're just what happens on the mat can also happen out in the world. And I feel like this conversation could just go on and on and on as we provide examples and metaphors and analogies and all those things for people. I'd like to know if there's one basic breath technique or mindfulness technique that is kind of a go-to or a favorite of each of yours that you might want to just share with our listeners that they could have just a little nugget of practical application to take with them from today.
Yeah, I mean, my kind of go-to that I use a lot in class, but also when I'm teaching mindfulness in like tricky situations or leading up to certain, maybe some uncomfortable situations, is a Durga breath or a three-part breath. It's just compartmentalizing the breath into three sections of your body to also slow the breath down and to slow your heart rate down. So I typically teach it with putting one hand on the heart and one hand on the belly, and I'll have folks exhale all the breath out of their belly and then take an inhale from the belly, an inhale from your chest, an inhale from your shoulders, and then just reverse it. Exhale shoulders, exhale chest, and exhale belly. So again, inhale belly, inhale chest, inhale shoulders, exhale shoulders, exhale chest, exhale belly. And doing that with your feet nice and grounded and firm on the floor, and just going through that breath. Even if, you know, you could do that in the car, you could do that waiting in the doctor's waiting room. Again, that's, I think, a really easy tool to put in your toolbox during those kinds of times where you feel anxious, but you need to slow your heart rate down a little bit.
I think my go-tos are always either Ujjayi breath, which is ocean's breath. It's audible restriction in the back of the throat that you try to lengthen your inhales as long as you can, and then really extend your exhales as like longer. Um, that one is when I'm trying to really slow down. But if I'm trying to get my attention, and I always end up doing this in the car because that's where you think a lot, and I fester in my car personally. So I take a really big swift inhale in, and I don't know if there's an actual name for it. And then it's like a really quick, and then I let it go nice and slow, and I draw it out until I can't, and then I do it again and again until I'm like, okay, I think we're back. We're back. We're good. And I have explained this to some of my clients or students in class, and they've also started doing it, and they've come back and they said, "You were so right." And I did it in my car, and I was great. I came back and I was ready to go, and I was like, "Okay, I'm glad."
I've had clients in mental health spaces before that have said, do you really mean to tell me that all I have to do is breathe and everything's going to be better? Yeah, I do mean to tell you that, because is it going to solve all of the world's problems? No. But is it going to make things better in this moment? Yes. Because all of us have those times where our bodies just all of a sudden take that big, huge, deep breath, and somebody might say, "Well, that was a big breath," or "Why are you sighing so hard," or something. And it's because our body is like, "Hello, we need some oxygen," and then you feel so much better after that breath. So why not use it as a tool that you can just grab one of these tools for breath? I love the two that you guys shared, and use them as an intervention when things either we think it's going to get hard or it already is hard, and we just want to give ourselves an opportunity to rest and to breathe. Awesome. Any last minute thoughts for our listeners from either one of you guys? I know, quick little hot seat moment, but anything else that you really want to make sure that our listeners take away from today?
Just that yoga or exercise is more than just, that time you spend either on your mat or at the gym. There's really just the benefits that happen off the mat and outside of the gym or after your run. That is what the goal is, right? That is the ultimate goal, is to be able to live, breathe, move freely. And those things happen through exercise, through yoga. And that's the goal, is we want to all just live and be able to move more freely in life.
We like to remind everybody that it's just yoga. Like, it's just the gym. It's just like, it's not anything special. You're not going to solve world hunger in there. You're just there for yourself. And again, like Kelley said, it's the little things that show up when you're not doing that. Like when you go to put your socks on, that's a big deal. You go up the stairs and it's not so like take the life out of you. Or you're in those high stress moments and you're okay. And that is the epiphany of those little details that make everything else worth it.
That's awesome. I really appreciate both of you, your time, your expertise, all of your wonderful ideas. We will make sure that we link the contact information for Evolve in our show notes. for our listeners so that they can find you if they have questions or want to reach out to do a class or one of those amazing retreats, or any other of the services that you guys offer. And as always, listeners, you can find us on our social media, Facebook and Instagram, as well as you can send us a DM or email me, Jennifer@hopehealingtherapy.com. I appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a great day.